So here we are, a couple days before your big math exam, and you're either gonna be in one or two camps. The first one, you're gonna be super ready and you know you're gonna crush it. Or the second one, you're low-key panicking and you think that I'm gonna hold the secret here to help you out. Well, unfortunately, I do not have the secret sauce, but I do have some pointers that I've seen successful students take over the past, and hopefully some of these things are gonna help you on your big day. So let's get into it. And the first thing is be boring. Stick to your routine. I know you would have heard a lot of different advice over the coming weeks and coming months, and even the days that just come before this, of trying different techniques and trying different preparation ideas and answering questions in different ways, getting out of bed at a different time, blah, 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 blah. Now, I would say don't do any of that. You don't want to be doing anything new for the exam day. You just want to be doing your basic routine. If you do not drink coffee, don't go buy a triple shot cappuccino on the morning of the exam. Don't go and get yourself 3 Vs and hammer them right before taking yourself into the exam hall. Okay, so just take it like you normally would. Your day is your regular day. The exam day is not a day to be trying new things that potentially are going to put you out of rhythm. And especially when you're in the exam, try and just do what you've been doing and what you've been practicing. Now, the second point is use your reading time wisely. So you get a bunch of reading time, which I think most students probably just waste trying to answer multiple choice questions in their head. Remember, you can always just guess the multiple choice. And in fact, you've got a 25% chance of actually answering one of those correctly. So save your energy and don't waste your time trying to figure out all the multiple choice questions in your reading time. As for all the short and long answer, you can't just guess them off the bat. I would say, let's spend more time there. All right, so if I were you, I would spend my reading time looking over the hardest questions. I would have a look at all the ones that look the most complex, the ones with kind of wild diagrams, and I would spend a bit of time just reading through it in a calm manner, but really taking the time to process what's happening. Now, I'm not saying solve it, okay? Because the reality is a lot of these questions need pen and paper to kind of hash out your ideas. But the idea is when you do this, you kind of let your subconscious brain take over. So when the time comes, once you start the exam, your brain's already slowly started to process, oh, maybe how can I attack this problem? What are some of the strategies that I can use, and what are some of the techniques that I've learned along the way that I could apply to this problem? We're not trying to tactically attack these problems by doing them in our heads during reading time. It's more to let your subconscious take over. Think of all the times where you've had this really troubling problem that you can't figure out. It's been racking your brain all day, and you go to bed. The next morning you wake up, have a super restful sleep, and then all of a sudden you just have this new insight. You might not have the answer, but all of a sudden you've got these new ideas to attack the problem. So the idea is the same, okay? So that's how I would spend my reading time, carefully looking at all those marks and all those questions that look super complex. So to my third point, and this is probably the most common mistake that I see students make, is that they get bogged down on a certain question. As a teacher, we've done supervision of exams. We've all seen how you interact with the paper, and some of you guys just get locked in so much that you can't manage to peel yourself off that question. That wastes so much time and energy for really no progress. As a rule of thumb, what you want to do is look at the amount of marks. So maybe it's a 2-mark question, and you really don't want to be spending more than double that amount of time, so 4 minutes on that specific question, unless you really feel like you've got some momentum going and you're really making some progress. Because the reality is, a lot of those times where you get bogged down, you get locked into a certain pattern of thinking, and you think that what you're doing is going to lead you to the solution, but you keep running into the same problem. That's a sign that you need to try something else. And most of the time, if you move on, once again, going back to the point before, you just let your subconscious take over and let your brain do all the heavy lifting. What I would also recommend if you get bogged down through this process is you can either circle all the ones that you get stuck on, is a pretty common kind of advice that you get given. But if you know that the pressure's on, maybe write the actual question on the front page of the book so you have a list, okay? So when you finish your exam, you can actually come back to the front cover of the list and just cross them off as you go through them. Because sometimes when you're panicking, you're trying to go through the whole booklet and you're trying to find out what you've circled, what you haven't circled, I can imagine that would be a pretty nerve-wracking thing. Consider just putting down a list on the front cover of all the questions. So for example, question 15, question 21A, question 30. And then that way, once you finish the exam, you can come back to the front and systematically cross them off as you go. So point number 4 is advice to get told whether you're doing a big exam or not, okay? And that's try to get a good night's sleep. Now, it's also kind of bad advice because the reality is you can't really control how well of a sleep you're gonna get. But what you can do is take steps that's going to increase the probability that you're going to get a restful sleep the night before. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. First one I would mention is don't get jacked up on caffeine the day before. If you are 7 coffees deep and 5 V's in by 6 p.m., that's not going to do you no favors for the next day, and especially getting that restful sleep that you need before an exam. Finally, I feel like I need to point out the obvious, but there's no point cramming till 4 a.m. the night before. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. You're better off getting a restful night's sleep, and whatever effort you're going to put in from, let's say, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. for that maths exam, I would argue that you're probably not going to get that much out of it. Instead, get an early sleep, have a nice dinner, leave a couple hours of digestion, and then go to bed. So remember, a restful mind is a sharp mind, and you're going to need that dome to go all out in a couple days' time. Okay, so my last point is something that I feel super strongly about as a teacher, is it burns me when I see kids walk out of the exam hall, because there is literally no return on investment when you walk out of the exam early. Like, what are you going to get? Like half an hour? What are you going to do with that time? You're going to waste it, scrolling on TikTok anyway. So you might as well stay in the exam and go through every single question like your life depended on it. And if you have the time towards the end, I would punch in the numbers in the calculator, because the reality is human error accounts for, a big part of what we call silly mistakes. Take the time you have left over to really intricately go through each question that has a bit of room for error, and even the ones that you think you've nailed. Because a lot of the times when I see my students' exam papers, it's questions that they should have nailed, but they didn't. It's the ones that I know they know how to do, but for whatever reason, human error, they rushed it the first time and they didn't check it the second time, has left them missing out on the easy marks that they end up kicking themselves for. Okay, that's it. I hope you found some insight and value out of this video. I hope that you kill your exam, which I'm sure you will. But at the end of the day, just remember, it is just an exam. Don't go freaking out and going crazy anxious about this test. It is just another day in your life, but you've done the right preparations and you've done the right things to know that you've got to put your best effort in on the day, and I'm sure you'll do well. So good luck, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.